Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Wealth Mudupolua Arugundade, and it's absolute pleasure to have you here at Data Fluence 2023. Today, we are exploring the Microsoft Fabric on the topic data warehouse. And we also have partners. And our keynote speaker is Charles Onyiboke. Charles Onyiboke is a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. He's so dedicated to assisting communities and developers in building business and applications analytics using Power Platform and Microsoft data technologies. Also, we have a speaker, Mr. Francis Folaromi. Mr. Francis Folaromi is a Microsoft certified data analyst, designing and implementing enterprise-scale analytics solutions that drive business decisions. His experience span multiple departments like sales, marketing, project management, and also is a research question and answer, and is also in support of every enterprise's business intelligence. And here we have Mr. Ayobami Adeleke, a dynamic and highly resourceful business intelligence developer, data analyst with demonstrated success in driving projects initiatives to accelerate organizational growth and gaining competitive edge. He is passionate about data, love to run data into information, information into insight, and insight into business decisions. Anyway, and we bring in the keynote speaker, that is Mr. Charles Onyiboke.
Data is everywhere, but organizations are starving with insight. This is why Microsoft Fabric is a perfect platform that brings together all the workload that is needed to get value from data. So it doesn't stop from there. Data warehouse is one of the components and workload of Microsoft Fabric, and I see this as the true messenger of insight from data. Having your data in lakehouse is not sufficient to meet the predictive analytics needs of your business. This is why data warehouse is best optimized to truly answer those questions that can propel growth in your organization. Don't put the data engineering workload of your business on top of your visualization tool like Power BI. For example, let a data warehouse handle those back-end work and make it easier for visualizers to tell this story. I welcome you to this episode where we talk about data warehouse, and I look forward to the amazing things you all will be learning in the course of this session. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Francis Folarami, you have the floor now. Okay, Mr. Ayobami Adeleke.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mudupela. Please confirm you can hear me. You can see me as well.
Yes, sir, I can,
Okay, thank you so
and I
much.
can see that.
Uh, all right, good. So my name is Ayobami Adeleke, like you rightly introduced. You have said a lot about me. You can presented a lot about me, but just to summarize, over the years I've worked on enterprise data warehouse projects, BI project implementations, and end-to-end data analytics projects across the banking industry, insurance, telecommunications, and currently I work in the FMCG industry. So today I'll be leading us on the journey of data warehousing. So to start, I would like to just project my PowerPoint slide. Okay, let me do this. Mudupe, do you want to help me from your end? Okay, it's coming up. All right, thank you. Please confirm you can see it.
Yes,
Awesome. All
it's
right.
coming up.
Okay. So, the agenda for this session, I'll try to make it brief. Data warehouse is a very robust topic. There are so many parts to it, but I've tried to simplify it and just pay attention to key areas that need to be discussed. So, as the agenda for this session, I would introduce us to data warehousing. What is a data warehouse? What is the structure of a data warehouse? What are the key components of a data warehouse? We'll look at the data warehouse architecture. We'll look at the implementation principles. I'll give us some tips on successful data warehouse project implementation. I'll discuss a few examples of the data warehouse that exists within the Microsoft ecosystem. And I will hand over to Francis Folaromi to walk us through the demo session on data warehousing on Microsoft Fabric. Okay, so to start, what is a data warehouse or what is data warehousing? So I would like to say data warehousing is actually a process and not a project or not a product, sorry. It is a process of integrating and managing enterprise data from different sources for the purpose of answering critical business questions and majorly for decision making. So, as an organization that has data seated in different line of business applications, they have a CRM solution, they have their core banking application, they have their sales analytics solution, be it Salesforce, they have an ERP solution, they have an HR application or a portal. How do they bring all of this data into a repository for critical analytics and insights? So that is the process of data warehousing. Now, on the other hand, what is a data warehouse? A data warehouse majorly is an online analytical processing database, which is strictly used for storing, for analyzing, and retrieving large amounts of historical data. So data warehouses are designed to support the efficient querying process of analyzing historical data because you don't want to go against your line of production databases, which are the OLTP databases, to run analytical queries because this is going to affect performance on the front end for your users. So you push all of the analytics workloads to this data warehouse model, which is designed and built specifically for reporting. So the data warehouse helps to support BI and data analytics applications. So your applications like Tableau, Power BI, Excel would all connect to this data warehouse to fetch data. Then you can then run your analytics, do your insights, and do your forecasting and predictions. Okay, so to answer enterprise level and department specific questions, the enterprise data warehouse ingests data from all the corporate business critical softwares and applications and some even some external data sources. which could be the ERP system, your accounting solution, maybe a talent management system that the HR department uses. It could even be your company website or the intranet. At the same time, it could be from your CRM solution, it could be from a business process management application, or maybe an IoT device, depending on the industry you find yourself. Now, I just want to make mention of a few benefits and disadvantages to a data warehouse. So I'll start with the benefits. So, as an organization, you stand to benefit the following when you implement a data warehouse within your organization. One is centralized repository. So you are confident to say you have all of your data sitting in one repository for analytics, such that when you want to run some analytics, you want to do some insights, or maybe you want to run some um, forecasting or predictive modeling on your historical data, you just go to that central repository and use that data set to do whatever you want to achieve. It also helps you to have improved data quality. So, to explain this, because you have done a thorough work to model the data warehouse, you have your fact tables properly modeled, you have your dimensions properly modeled. The quality of data you use for your reporting is as good as the quality of data in the data warehouse. So if you have done a thorough job to provide clean and accurate data in your data warehouse, to a high level, you have confidence in the quality of data you use for your BI reporting. So this leads me to the third point, which is improved business intelligence. So when you have provided quality data in the data warehouse, you are confident to have a better data set for your BI analytics and reporting. Then on this other side, we have scalability. So one thing about data warehouses is that they are built to hold historical data, so they have capacity for large volumes of data. You need to put all of this into consideration when implementing the data warehouse, of course. So because of this, it's scalable. You will consider the fact that you want to increase your data is growing over time, and you need to make accommodation for data your business is generating on a daily basis, because all of your operational data will be moving from your line of business applications by scheduled jobs into the data warehouse model. And in terms of performance, data warehouses allow you to do better analysis. Unlike when you are doing self-service BI, you have analysts that are just trying to do some little BI on their laptops or on their desktops, as against having a central enterprise data warehouse where all of the enterprise analysts connect to this model, pull out data for their reports, and they're able to do high level BI reporting for the department or for their line managers. Now let's speak about the disadvantages. So on the flip side, the disadvantages of a data warehouse, well, they are not really disadvantages, but they are potential issues people face trying to implement one. So the first one is usually the complexity. A data warehouse project is a quite complex project. It involves a whole lot of processes. You have to do a thorough business requirement gathering. You have to have series of sessions with the business stakeholders. You need to understand where the data sits. You need to understand how to extract the data. You need to understand applying the right business rules and business logic to your data set before this data is integrated into the data warehouse. Another thing is the cost of implementation. Because data warehousing is quite complex and complicated, um, organizations tend to spend a lot to get this implemented in their enterprise, because sometimes they don't have the skills in-house, they don't have the capable resources in-house to do the implementation. They have to outsource the projects to maybe some consultants or to some OEMs, and these people will charge them a fortune to get the project done. Then on the third side of it, you have the maintenance, because when you develop a data warehouse, your business data keeps changing, it keeps growing. So there's a need for constant maintenance of the data warehouse to ensure that as your business logics are changing, you are applying those changes and implementing them in the data warehouse. Otherwise, your reporting will be false because you are not applying the right logic within the data warehouse. Now, looking at the structure of a typical data warehouse, a data warehouse will naturally contain fact and dimensional tables. It will contain sometimes views, stored procedures, and some other database objects. So I would just like to speak on the dimensional tables and the fact tables, because these are the major constituents of a data warehouse. So the dimension tables helps to contain descriptions of the objects in a fact table, and they help you to provide insight or information about the dimensions, such as maybe the values, the names, the characteristics, and some keys that link them to your fact table. And within a typical data warehouse, within a typical dimensional model, you would find samples of dimension tables. You will find will be your dim customer table, your dim products, your dim date, which is very critical for every data warehouse. Then in the telecoms industry, some of them use dim calendar, dim time, because they try to do analytics based on time series and on the different hours of the day. They want to see what is happening per minute, what is happening per hour. So they go to granular as dim time. Also, we look at fact tables. So fact tables majorly are the tables that stores the measurements or the metrics or the business facts that we are trying to analyze. So it is usually located at the center of a star or snowflake schema and is surrounded by the dimensional tables. So a typical example of this is your fact sales table, your fact inventory, or maybe your fact revenue, whatever insights your business is trying to analyze. All of those data would typically sit in your fact table. Then you relate these tables to your dimensional tables by foreign and primary key relationships. So here we have a typical structure, diagrammatical structure of a data warehouse. So on the left is what we have. We have a fact table in the star schema model, which is related to different dimensions, and we can see the cardinality of the relationships. So it goes from this fact table to the dimension tables is a many to one relationship, meaning that you have many entries for that dimension in your fact table, and you only have one corresponding record in the dimension table. So a typical example is the fact sales table and the dim customer table. For every customer you have in your dimension dim customer, for every unique customer, you could have multiple transactions in the fact sales table. Similarly, for your dim dates, the dates table holds the dates of your transaction or your sales. So for every date you pick from the dimension table, there's a many leg to it in your sales table, because on that same day you could have multiple sales. You could have multiple sales from multiple customers. So this is the structure of how the data is modeled. Now, on the right hand side, you have a typical structure of the DIM table, DIM products table relating to your factory reseller sales. You have your DIM dates, you have the DIM reseller dimension, the DIM employee, and the DIM sales territory. So, the facts table is surrounded by five dimension tables, and all of these are related by the foreign keys. And you can see the keys on the dimension table. The sales territory key goes to the key column in your facts reseller sales table. Similarly, the DIM product table is relating to the fact reseller sales table based on the product key column. So all of these things are things that needs to be considered when designing and modeling the object within the data warehouse. Okay, next slide. So looking at the components of a data warehouse, there are three key components that should always come to mind. The first one is your data sources, because of course, without the data sources, you don't have a data warehouse. Your data warehouse is supposed to help you to collate and combine and integrate all of this data from the different line of business applications, which are the different data sources the organization has. So you want to pull data from a database, from a website, from an Oracle application, from an API, name it, any kind of data source whatsoever. You need to identify all of the data sources you have in the business. The next thing is you need to make availability an optional data store or a staging area where you will be dumping all of this data from your data sources into before it eventually goes into your data warehouse schema. Then finally, the data storage. So we have been talking of pulling data from line of business applications. We have talked about the staging area. So all of these places are databases, and all of these databases require physical or cloud storage to store this data. So a typical example would be maybe you want to store all of this in a cold storage database on the cloud, or maybe on premises. It's now the choice of the organization to make, or the team implementing the data warehouse. So critically, data storage is very important, because you also need to think about how your data grows over time. So you could want to deploy a storage of maybe a 10 TB for a start. And as your business grows, as you generate data day in, day out, and you move this data from your line of business applications, it goes into the excuse me, it goes into the operational data store or your staging area, and from there it moves into your data warehouse. So all of these things are generating storage space, and they are taking up space in your storage medium. Now let's look at the three-tier data warehouse architecture. So three tier is the bottom layer, the middle layer, and the top layer. So basically, the bottom layer holds your data. So it consists of the raw data that is extracted from the line of business applications. It consists of um, different kind of databases, the staging environment. Now you have the middle tier, which contains the processes you use to transform your data. It contains your ETL processes, the data cleansing solutions or queries, your data quality validation and checks that you do to ensure that you're actually loading the right data into the data warehouse model, into your fact tables, into your dimension table. You don't want to load incomplete data or inconsistent data. Now, the final layer, which is the top layer, is basically the data presentation layer, which is for reporting and analytics. So this is where your analysts will connect to, where they connect using their reporting tools, their data mining tools, or BI solution tools. Okay. So this is a typical data warehouse architecture. So on the far left, we have our data sources. We have multiple operational systems. We have flat files. You could have APIs. Now we also have the ODS, which is the data staging area, where we do some data processing to combine all of this data into one database or into one schema. And finally, we have some ETL jobs that also pick up this data from the staging environment and load it into our data warehouse. Now, the data warehouse is a bigger database. Now, you can see it contains of three forms of data. You have metadata about your data. It has the raw data that you are bringing in that has been transformed and brought in, and it has the summary data, which is what you have prepared for BI reporting. So all of these are levels to the data validation transformation that has been done from the data sources into the ODS and finally to the data warehouse. Then on the other hand of it, you have our data marts. So data marts are smaller models that are feeding off data from the data warehouse. So you want to build dedicated data marts for the different maybe departments or the different functions or units within the business. So you have a dedicated data mart for your sales function, a dedicated data mart for marketing, and something similar for maybe finance or engineering. Now, your analyst or your business users can all connect to this data mart as against connecting directly to the data warehouse. So this is just some level of data security to ensure that you are limiting access to enterprise data. You don't want somebody in sales to be able to have access to data in the data warehouse for marketing, which doesn't concern him or her. So this is just trying to put in some data security into place. Now, let's look at some data warehousing implementation principles. So, going by history, there are two fundamental design methods which you could employ when you want to model a data warehouse. You might want to do the Immon's top-down method or the Ralph Kimball's bottom-up method. So these are two approaches, and basically, I'll start with the Immon approach. So the Immon approach is more of the enterprise data warehouse model, whereby you put data directly from all of your line of business applications directly into a data warehouse model. You just dump the entire data there, and from there, you now start building out your different data marts, and your users can connect to that. But there's a limitation to this, and that's because you are not really putting into consideration the business goals or what the business is trying to, the challenges they have. So in this process, all of the data is just brought in, even the ones that are not in need or that will not be needed for analytics. You are bringing everything in. So this is not really best practice, although it has its own good side in terms of it's easy to implement, it's faster to implement, and maybe for some people it's easier to manage. On the other side, we have the Kimball's approach. So this is more focused on the bottom-up approach, whereby you start from the bottom. You are committed to, maybe you want to answer just one or two questions for your business. Maybe a sales department has some issues. They want to be able to track previous year sales. They want to be able to forecast next year's sales. So you build a data mart for the sales team, and this data mart is sitting within the data warehouse. Maybe tomorrow now production needs some data. You just connect to that same data mart, to the same data warehouse. Sorry, you could still reference same tables you've used for sales in terms of maybe your products, in terms of customers. So you are still using the same dimension tables, but now you are now expanding that model. And one thing to take note of here is that you always go the route of dimensional data warehousing. So when we say dimensional data warehousing, the star schema concept is comes into play, comes to mind. You want to ensure that all of your tables, your fact tables, are not relating to corresponding fact tables. Rather, your fact tables are related to dimensional tables alone. Because this is the standard concept for a star schema model, whereby you have dimensions relating to your fact, like I showed us earlier. Now, the key sources of data needs to be identified and documented before you can actually go the Kimball approach, because you want to be sure you are picking the right data to answer the question of the business. Unlike in the Emmons approach, whereby nothing comes to mind, you just dump all of the data, you make it available for whoever needs it. So I'll proceed. Okay, so I want to give us some practical steps to building a data warehouse. To start with, building a data warehouse requires the first thing required rather is the business requirement definition. So, as somebody embarking on a data warehouse project, you want to implement a data warehouse for an organization. The first thing that comes to your mind is you want to understand the overall goals of the company, as well as maybe if there are some particular business units that are interested in doing some BI reporting. What are their BI reporting needs? What do they want to start seeing? What kind of insight do they want to do? Are they interested in just descriptive analytics? Do they want to go prescriptive or some advanced analytics implementation? So all of these things you need to understand. Next thing you need to discuss with them is what are the methods and metrics that they use to measure success as a business? What are their major business KPIs that they are trying to track? Once you have all of these things, you make sure you prepare a document that states all of this in clear terms so that when you go back to model your data, you have an understanding of what they need. Another thing to note is the key issues the business is facing. So, how do I explain this now? Every business has a challenge they are trying to solve, right? So, and now you want to help them to model a data warehouse. This data warehouse is supposed to use data to help them to provide solutions to their business problems. So, you need to understand the problems and also advise them as a data person to know what kind of reports or dashboards they can actually build with the data they currently have. Something you also need to note is the type of routine data analysis that the company is currently performing. So they could have some self-service analysts that are doing some crude analytics or analysis on their Excel applications, or maybe using Power BI locally and not at enterprise scale. You might want to sit with these people, understand what data they are using, how are they doing this, what's the frequency of the reports they build, what are the potential improvements that these reports they have been doing in small scale, what has it brought to the department, and how you can make this um, a full-fledged reporting solution for the organization. So prior to the post this, you now discuss with them the operational systems that generates all of this data. So one step leads to the other. When you identify the analysis they do, you need to understand the data they use, where this data is coming from, and also the data update frequency. Is it a daily report? Is the data changing? Do they generate this data on a daily basis, or is it a monthly basis, or how does it work? You need to have all of this understanding. So the next thing to discuss will be the availability of historical data. Should, in case they want to do some historical analysis, do they have that data available? At this point, you might want to sit with the data team to understand if how far back of historical data they can provide. Is this something that is easily accessible? Can they really make that data available in no time to you to import and extract into your data warehouse? All of these things you need to discuss with the different stakeholders. Now, the next thing to discuss is what tools are used to access and analyze information. So you might be interested in asking what they currently use and what they are aiming to use in the nearest future, or maybe based on this project implementation of the data warehouse, maybe they are ready to spend some money to purchase some more advanced BI tools or analytical tools. So all of these conversations need to happen. You need to engage the different stakeholders, from the those that are operational, those that are just business oriented, and those that are actually hands-on in terms of providing you this data to do this project. Now, the next question to ask is what types of insights are routinely generated or are to be generated? Okay, so the next question beyond, or the next process rather now, or step is you need to identify, after you have identified or built the business requirement documentation, you now need to do a data warehouse conceptualization and a technology selection. So you have understood the pain points of the business, you now understand where their data sits, you understand what they are trying to achieve by implementing a data warehouse, you understand the frequency of data refresh, you understand basically everything that needs to be understood to actually implement the solution properly. Now it's for you as the technical person to now identify what architecture works best for this implementation. Do you want to go the Ralph Kimball approach? Do you want to go the Imam way? Depending on your conversations with the business, you then come up with the proposal to say, okay, we'll go this approach. You do an evaluation and select the optional or optimal technology for each of the architectural components, be it your staging areas, the storage area. Do we want to go cloud? Do we want to do on-prem? Do we want to actually outsource to maybe a dedicated data center to store our data warehouse information? All of these things are things you now need to come up with proposals for the business, because you are the technical person, you understand the impacts, and you understand how all of these decisions affect or eventually will affect the outcome of the project and the implementation. So while drawing up the tech stack, you need to consider the following factors. One, their current technological environment. So what is the current landscape? Are they fully on premises, or do they run an hybrid environment whereby some data is currently sitting on prem, some are in the cloud? So with that, you are able to predict or prefer or prefer to them. Maybe let's try to use an Azure SQL database, or let's go Azure Synapse, or maybe let's even try the Microsoft Fabric that was just released. So you can then decide, you can advise accordingly. The next thing you also need to consider is maybe as a business, they have some planned strategic and technological directions they are planning to implement in the nearest future. They could have a proposal or a plan to actually, in the next couple of months, roll out something on the cloud. That could be an opportunity. Oh, yeah, so since we are going cloud, why don't we just implement our data warehouse on the cloud at the same time? So, those are just some strategic decisions that you need to make. Also, something else you need to look at is the technical competence of the in house IT team members. So, now, this is a project that is usually, if it's going to be implemented in-house, it should be done by the IT team, maybe the data team and some developers, some BI developers, and things like that. So you need to look at the competency of your resources. Do we want to do this in-house fully, or do we want to outsource this to consultants or to vendors? So at this point, all of these decisions need to be made. We also need to look at the specific data security requirements. So you want to be sure that you define security requirements such that your data is not exposed to just anybody. Um, as you are providing data to the team implementing this, you have different levels of security, you have different levels of approval. So you are not just exposing all of the enterprise data to those that are working on the project, because you don't know what they could do with your data. So you need to be sure that maybe the security units are coming up with initiative or some protocols or processes to ensure that there's a level to how data is exposed. Now, you need to also define the deployment option. I mentioned this earlier. Do you want it to be on the cloud, on premise, or an hybrid solution? So all of these things are to be decided upon. Another thing you need to consider is the volume of data, the nature of your data, the cost of the project, and all of these things. So you need to discuss all of this with various business and project stakeholders. Now, the data warehouse environment design. So now this is now getting technical. Now you have done all of those things, you provided the recommendation. Now you want to sit down, now identify your data sources. What kind of data types are these data? How are they coming? In what structure? Is it structured data? Is it unstructured? Or do you even have some semi-structured data? Are they JSON files? Are there some packet files? Are there some audio files that you want to do some analysis around? Also, what's the volume of information that is generated on a daily by the business? What volume of data do we generate monthly? What volume of data is generated on a periodic basis? And you also need to consider the data quality that you are getting. Do you need to enrich this data before you load it into the data warehouse? Do you need to do some sensitivity labels? Do you need to ensure that you flag the labels of your data accordingly? In looking at things like your PII, you want to be sure that employee information that are sensitive are properly managed. You don't want it to get into the hands of your consultants or to whoever is working on the project. So you need to put in some data security and some sensitivity labels to ensure that you're able to actually have a control over your data. Also, you need to consider the refresh frequency of your data sources. Do you need to go back to these systems on a daily basis, maybe every night, to pull data for the day into the data warehouse? When you have done all of these validations, you have identified it, you have properly documented all of this. The next thing that comes to mind is creating your logical data model. So this is you typically building business entities and their attributes. Entities are majorly relationship modeling used in the database model, such that you have a normalized schema that helps you to identify the different tables that you need to create, which are going to now transcend to your dimensional modeling. So you start from the logical data modeling to the dimensional modeling. So you have a holistic picture. Okay, I have a customer information in this table. I want to model customer name, phone number, address, email, and all of those things. So all of those things now transcend to what you create in your star schema model and what you eventually create in your um, dimensional tables. Now, looking at the logical data models, all of these are finally converted into database structures. For examples, your entities are converted into tables. Yes, the attributes are translated into columns. Now, relationships are converted into foreign key constraints or foreign key and primary key relationships, because you want to ensure that you're able to manage that relationship and build that star schema relationship, because that is very typical for your data warehouse. Now, you need to design your data staging area. You need to define and control the source to target data flow to support your subsequent data loads and even your initial load. Because to start with, your data staging area would be empty. So you need to do a full upload of data from the source systems, so which is your initial load. And for your subsequent loads, you now do the delta loads to pick records that have come in, that have been created or generated after your initial load. So you want to then consider, how do I want to manage incremental load and all of those things. So all of those things are things that you need to factor and consider when you are doing your data warehouse design. It brings you to the ETL designs that you now talk about. How do I create my ETL packages? What solution do I want to use? Do I want to use Azure Data Factory? Do I want to use SSIS packages? Or do I just want to do everything on Fabric? It's your decision to make. Okay, let me go to the next slide. So now the data warehouse development itself. So after all of those documentation, all of those brainstorming sessions you've had with the business, now you now want to customize and configure the technologies that you've decided to go with, the data warehouse platform, the data transformation technologies, your data security approach, your ETL packages. Now the work of ETL development now starts. You now need to start building packages or pipelines that helps you to extract data from your line of business applications into your staging area, then from the staging area subsequently into the data warehouse. Because it's not best practice that you just extract data directly to your data warehouse. You should have this data sitting in a staging environment initially, such that your users, your business rules, you can apply them, you can do your transformation, you can shape the data, model the data properly, and make it fit for load into the data warehouse model. Now, at this point, you also want to test the data warehouse performance in terms of query performance. You want to ensure that your queries are optimized, your fact tables, you create your indexes, you create all of those things that makes querying the data warehouse more optimal and more efficient. Your ETL as well, you want to test your incremental load to be sure that when you are running those packages, you are not missing data or you are not duplicating data, because this has high impact on your values, your data accuracy, your data validation, and all of that. Then you also want to set up jobs that helps you to automate this extraction, that helps you to trigger these jobs maybe on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, depending on how frequent the data changes and how frequent the report needs updated data. Now you need to also validate and verify your data quality in terms of completeness, correctness, security. You want to be sure that you are not exposing data to somebody that doesn't need access to such data. You want to ensure that you give adequate access to the data warehouse or to the data mart based on the user needs and requirements. Okay, so I'll just give us a few tips around data warehouse project success tips. So basically, the first one is it's best practice to start data warehouse deployment as agile projects, whereby you have an MVP. Okay, we want to push out a small data mart for sales. We want to do this at the end of this implementation. We then scale it out. We do something for production. We do something for the finance team. We do something for the logistics team. And as you do all of these things, you are enriching the data warehouse, you are building more tables, you are creating more relationships, you are expanding the jobs, you are creating more ETLs, more pipelines, more data is coming into the data warehouse schema. You also need to consider the storage, because all of these things, all of this data you are pulling, they require space to sit in the data warehouse. So the data warehouse should be a server that is very robust, or a database that is large enough to hold as much data as possible that the business is generating. So the next thing here is you need to focus on business requirements, and this is very critical, because if you have built a data warehouse that doesn't satisfy the needs of your business, then it's as good as it being a failed project, because typically your business requirements should drive what you implement in your data warehouse project, such that when your business users are saying, okay, we have a question around our sales, we are not able to track last year's sales against current year's sales. We want to see the last 5 years profitability against what we are doing in this current financial year. They should be able to go back in time to view all of those insights from your data warehouse. But if your data warehouse is not giving them that, they won't be happy because you have not answered their needs. So another thing to consider is ensure that you have a close cooperation between the IT team and the business team, because the IT will give you the access to the data. They tell you where all of these line of business applications sit. The business users are those that understand this data. They work more with this data on a day-in, day-out basis. So they can tell you that, okay, I need this data to answer this, to build this kind of reports, and to get this kind of insights for my manager or something like that. Okay, so to wrap up, I'll just give us a few examples of data warehouses. The first one we have here is the traditional on-premise data warehouse, which is typically you just modeling the data warehouse within an on-premise deployment, such that it has nothing to do with the cloud. Everything is within your physical enterprise. And we also have the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which you could host on an Azure subscription on the Azure cloud. We also have the Azure Synapse Analytics, which is an end-to-end Azure data integration and analytics solution built by Microsoft that allows you to do end-to-end analytics from data integration, data modeling, data transformation to reporting, and even machine learning and data science. And now, with the invent of Microsoft Fabric, we also have the data warehouse in Microsoft Fabric, which is the core for today. Okay, so at this point, I'll hand us over to Mr. Folaromi to walk us through a demo series on data warehousing in Microsoft Fabric. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ayobami Adeleke. Thanks so much for the insightful lessons. And Mr. Francis, you can have the floor now, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
All right. Please confirm if you can see my screen now.
Not yet, sir. Yes,
Okay.
it's up now.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francis, and thank you for a very wonderful presentation, Mr. Evami. It was a very fantastic session, and he has laid the template for me to continue with my demonstration. So I'll do less of talking, and then I'll show us what the data warehouse look like on Microsoft Fabric. So Ibami has done most of the theory. So I just have this architecture of data warehousing within the Fabric environment where you get data from your data source, either through a pipeline, then you get it into your warehouse, and then you can get it exposed to those that need the data from the system. So my demo is going to include how to create a data warehouse, ingesting data using T-SQL, that's Transact SQL. Then we can also ingest data from pipeline. Then I will do a little transformation and then analyze with Notebook. And then we're also going to see a demonstration of how to uh, cross query warehouses and build a simple report. So I'll just go back to our Power BI service now. So like Ayobami mentioned, you can warehouse is one of the 7 features or experiences that we have in Microsoft Fabric. What we are used to before it was announced is just Power BI service. But now with Microsoft Fabric, it's combination of Synapse Analytics, Microsoft Power BI, and then Microsoft Purview. So once you are logged in your Power BI environment, you can then choose the experience that you will be working with. So here is a small logo here where you can actually navigate to and then change your experience. So if I click on this now, we can see all the experiences that is available within Microsoft Fabric. So our focus today is data warehouse. So I can then navigate to data warehouse. So once I switch to data warehouse experiences, these are the new assets I can create within um, Fabric environment, and then we can create a warehouse, you can create a sample warehouse, and then you can create a pipeline. So let's just create a simple warehouse now. Then before you do that, you just have to ensure that you are in a Fabric enabled workspace. Because I'm in just my default workspace, which is my workspace, that's why it's prompting me that I should upgrade to a free trial. So to create a warehouse and enjoy Fabric, you have to go to a Fabric enabled workspace. So I had created this workspace for the sake of this demonstration now, called Nigeria Data Platform. So inside my Fabric enabled workspace, and I'm already within my data warehouse experience, then I have these options available to me. I have new, I have upload, and then create app. So for our demonstration, I'm going to click on new, and then I can then select a data warehouse that I want to create. So I can select warehouse. So once I select the warehouse, I can then give it a name. I'll just call it DW for warehouse and select create. So that will be the name of our warehouse, and then our warehouse will be created. To ingest data into our warehouse, we have just a very limited option. But just like Mr. Adewale taught us and Mr. Isaka Popola last week, that we have data factory within Fabric. We also have data flow gen 2. So you can combine these two ETL2 to actually ingest data into your warehouse. So our warehouse is being created right now. So that may take a few seconds, and then once it's created, we can explore all of these options that is right above here. You can click on get data, you can query your data set within your warehouse, and then you can even do a visual query, which is a very fantastic one that gives visual to what you can do in Microsoft Fabric. So our data warehouse has been created. Once it's created, we have this schema, we have security, and then you have your queries. Either the queries that you are writing yourself, or a query that is being shared with you. And that's in the case where you are collaborating with another person on the same project. So we can create table with T-SQL, or you can import data using a pipeline, or you can use a sample data. So the first thing we want to do is to create table with T-SQL. So I'm just going to see that you click on create table with T-SQL here, or you can click on get data right here. So if you click on get data right here, what you have available is just a data pipeline. So, but because I want to create a table with T-SQL now, I'm just going to select create table with T-SQL, and then it will give me this SQL query interface where I can then use a query. So to save us time, I had prepared queries of tables I want to create. So I will just copy the table, the queries rather, to create the tables that I'll be using for this demonstration. So just our conventional SQL queries that we use to create table. So I'll just copy that right now, then I'll paste it right here and replace it. So once that is created, I can then click on run. So sorry, I think I didn't copy the query very well. So let me just copy again. I will replace the query that I've copied now, then I will run it again. And that will create two tables for me, which is dimension table for city, and then also a fact table for sales. So this is running successfully now. It has run successfully. You can see that it's showing us that it succeeded in 6 seconds. So you can adjust this interface now to get more real estate and see what you have created. Now, to be sure that the table that you are trying to create is genuinely created, you can come right here on your schema, and then you can do a drop down, and then you can see DBA and guest. Then you do a drop down for your DBA again. Then you can see functions, store procedures, tables, and then view. So we had created two tables, which is a dimension city table and fact table. So I can query this table now, and expectedly, I don't expect to have any data inside of this table, but just the schema, since we don't have any table yet. So that is going to run, and then we are just going to have an empty table with just the column headers. So I want to actually import data into our table now. So I'm going to click on new query, where it's going to get a new SQL query rather. So once I click on new SQL query, then I'll also copy a query I had prepared. In this query now, we are going to use a copy statement, where there is a URL for public data that we can use to actually ingest data into our system. This URL is actually Azure storage URL that I can use. So I can paste that here. So I did, it was not copied. So I can copy and then go back to my SQL interface and paste it. Then I can run this. So once this is run, then we expect that, oh, we now have data inside of our table. So this is still running. Let's take 14 seconds. So once that is done, then I can then come back to this my second query, and then I can run this. This time now, I will expect that my table is now populated with data. So now the latency is actually coming into play here, because the blob storage is probably far from my location. I'm currently within South Africa space, but the data storage is elsewhere. So these are some of the things that you consider when you are trying to connect to a storage. You bring the storage into a location that is close to you because of performance. So that is what is happening right now. So once that is done, then I will run this query again, and then we'll see that our table has been populated. So I can also go back to that. We'll come back to this when this is done. I'll come back to our workspace now and create a second query. So on the second query now, okay, it's not allowing me to do that. So let's just wait for it to run successfully before we go ahead and create a table using a pipeline. So better still, I will just open a new tab so that we will not waste our time today. So I'll open a new tab, then we continue, and then we work simultaneously so that I will not bore us with the query that is running right now. It's not supposed to take this long, but I don't know. Probably it's the network. So I'll open a new tab where we can create a second data warehouse and see how we can actually ingest data using a pipeline. So I'll navigate to the workspace that I had created, which is Ninja Data Platform. So right from there, I can create a second data warehouse now. So I'll give it a name. So I'm within Power BI Experience. So what I can create when I'm Power BI Experience is different from the things I can create when I'm on Data Warehouse Experience. So I will switch to Data Warehouse Experience within my workspace, and then I can then create a new warehouse. So I will call this warehouse now BW1 to serve as a warehouse that we are going to be using for this demonstration. So our table has been created now. So I can then run this query once again and see if we now have data in our table. So now we now have data in our table. So this is the outcome of the query, and you can actually save it as a view. So but before you can do that, you have to ensure that the query you want to save as a view is selected, and then you can click on save as a view. So it's actually a low code interface. Instead of having to create a view and give it a name by yourself, you can select it, click, and then give your view a name. I can call that view fact table. So I can give it a name, which is this. Then I can click on OK. So once that is done, I can just come back to my SQL object right here, and then I will just refresh my DBO to be sure the schema has been created. I think this is issues because it's a demo, so I'll do that again to be sure. I'll just call it B. I'll click on OK right now. So I think his network. I am trying to let me try again. Let me just call it view. So that's network. So we'll come back to that. So your query, you can actually visualize your query individually or the entire data set within your warehouse, or you can even say it like a table. You can run it as Excel file, depending on your workload. So I've created a second warehouse now. So I mentioned that you can bring in data sets into your warehouse using T-SQL, or you can use a pipeline. So the second method now is a pipeline. So is that I go through this route to get a pipeline, or I use this line. Either case, that is also going to open up the pipeline interface for me, where I can do several activity, from your data flow activity, your copy activity, your delete activity. But the interesting thing with Fabric now is that Outlook and Teams has been incorporated into Outlook, that you can even add it as part of your pipeline, so that people are notified if your pipeline is running successfully, who are the people that you want to be notified, and all of those things. So all of these things are possible inside of Fabric. So Mr. Adewale already gave us a solid foundation as far as pipeline is concerned. So when you try to create a pipeline for the first time, you have this interface where you can actually use sample data sets, and then you have this pane to your left hand side that is showing us a linkage of all the steps that is required for you to keep a pipeline. So this is copy assistant, which I will not be using in our case now. So I'll just click on cancel, then it is going to give me the entire pipeline interface. So I can add any activity of choice. We have we are go to activity tab now. We have a copy activity. Either you want to use a copy assistant, or you want to use a copy activity. So if I choose to use a copy assistant, that is also fine. Then you can actually choose a template that you can work with. So there are templates that are already designed inside of pipeline that you can use to start your project. So these are the various templates that is available. So you want to have a bulk copy from a particular database, you can use this. Or you want to copy from Azure SQL database into a lakehouse, you can use all of these things. So but in our case now, I will just create a simple data flow activity. So if I will click on data flow right now, and then the activity will be added to my Canva. And then to ingest data into my data flow now, I'll have to come to setting. If I'm okay with the name, is fine, but I can always change it. So let me just give it data flow DW. So then I will come navigate to setting. So once I get to setting, I'm expected to pick a data flow, but because a data flow has not been created, you are not going to see anything. So you can click on refresh. That is after a data flow has been created, or you had created your data flow before you come into your pipeline. But because you're working on Synapse warehouse now, we don't have a data flow activity to ingest data straight into your warehouse. You have to come through the route of a pipeline. Then inside your pipeline, you can then create a data flow. So I'm just going to click on new now. So that will open up our Power Query Online for me, where I can use all the several connectors that is available to copy data into my pipeline, and then from there I can ingest and orchestrate it into the warehouse. So this is our Power Query online interface, where I can then use to do my data cleaning and transformation. So I want to copy a data from on-prem source. So I will click on import. So once I click on import, which is an SQL database, I can use get data like we typically do for our Power Query Online. But before you continue here, you have to set up your data gateway, since you are ingesting data on an on-prem source. So I had already configured my data gateway and it's up and running right now. So I won't need to waste time and show us how to control a gateway. So if once your gateway is on and is already in the right location, in our case now, which is South Africa North, then you can then ingest data from your on-prem source. So I will just select on import from SQL server. So once I do that now, I need to fetch my server name, which is my local machine server. So I can navigate to my SSMS and then click on connect here, so that I can just fetch my server name. So I'll copy this now, which is my server name, do Control A, Control C to copy. Then I can come back to my I can come back to my Fabric environment and paste the server. So because I had connected before, it's automatically fetching the gateway. But if you had not done that before, you just have to click on this edit connection, and then you can set it up manually. Then you put in your window, your username and your password. So once that is done, is established, you can then uh so I will go back now so that we don't have to start that all over again. So I will start again and then paste my server name, then I will click on next. So once I click on next, if I have a custom query I want to use, I can of course do the advanced option and paste my SQL query here. So but I'm not going to do that now for the tables I want to bring into our warehouse. So I'll just click on next, and then I'll specify the name of the database, which is very optional, which I have not done. So that will take time for me to that will take time so that the on-prem data source will be available for me to select. I can then select the tables that I want to bring into our Synapse warehouse within Microsoft Fabric. So now these are all the database that is available in my local machine. So let me show us. So this is my SQL server. These are various databases that we have in my SQL server. So because the connection has been established between my SSMS now, we can see that all those tables now are now available even inside Microsoft Fabric. So I want to connect to this Contoso Retail database, and then I can then pick the tables or the views that I want to bring into my warehouse inside of Fabric environment. So in our case now, I'm just going to take our dim channel table. I'll also take date table. Then I'll pick product table. Then I can also pick store table. So I want to bring in our dimension table first. Then I will do it the second time to also bring in our fact table. Then I can click on create. So once I click on create, all these data sets will actually be imported into our data flow. So we have them in our data flow now. We can see the apply steps just like we will see in our Power Query desktop. But this is Power Query online, so that is loading up. But for the sake of optimization, I always liked for it is best practice that we always use custom query to bring our data into our destination. In this case now, our Synapse warehouse are in Fabric environment. So that is loading up now to bring in the entire data set. So I'll come back to my SSMS studio so that I can fetch the fact table. So this is the query for the fact table. So I will just copy this right now, and then I will use it to establish a connection to bring in our fact table into Power Query Online. So these are all the tables that we imported. These are the dimension tables. So I want to quickly mention something at this point. Under the apply steps, unlike on our Power Query desktop, there is a little icon right in front of the apply steps. You can see in front of navigation one where you have like a cylindrical object with a flash icon. So this is trying to show us that yeah, query folding is possible. So you want to be sure that query folding is applied for every transformation that you are performing, so that the performance of your warehouse is actually optimized, and then retrieving data sets and your data refreshes are actually very fast. So you can right click on that, and you can right click on it and to see the SQL query that is available for you. So, but that is not going to happen here because we didn't specify the SQL query. So that is why I want to bring in a data set using specified query. So I'll click on get technical once again, and then select SQL Server database. So that is going to take me through the same process again. I can then fetch the server name. So I can fetch the server name right now and go back to my Fabric environment. So I will paste the server name once again. Then I'll go to the advanced option where I can paste my custom query. So I want to fetch the query right now. So I'll just copy this entire query that I want to use. Then I do Control A, Control C to copy my query. Then I can then go back to Fabric environment and paste the query right here. So once that query is pasted, I think network is disturb. Network is affecting what we are doing. So let me cancel and then do it once again. So I'll click on data and then SQL database, where I can then fetch my server name. Throughout all of this process, you have to ensure that your data gateway is actually up and running, else you are just going to run into troubles. So let me go back so that I can paste the SQL query. So I'll click on advanced option now, then come back to fetch the SQL query I intend to use, which is this, Control A, Control C, then come back to fabric environment and then do Control V. So then I can click on next, but I have to specify my database, which is Contoso Retail DW. So once that is done now, I can click on next. So after I click on next, then our data sets will be available inside of Power Query Online. So once that is done, I will quickly show us the difference between when I'm using a custom query and when I don't use a custom query. So when I use a custom query, we see that the apply step is just one, and you can change the apply your source if you so desire, and then you can also right click right here and you can view the query of the source that you are using. You can do that and then you can see the SQL query even within your apply steps. So now that we have all the tables that we are going to use for the demonstration inside this data flow, we have to specify the destination. Unlike Power Query Desktop, we need to specify the destination here, and that is one icon that is different from Power Query Desktop. So we have this add data to destination icon right here, and then we also have data destination here. So we are going to use this route first to specify. But before I go, I need to rename this. So the name of our facts table, which is fact sales table. So I can then specify the destination. Now, the destination that is available within data flow as of today, they are very limited. They include the SQL data source, your lakehouse, or your data warehouse. In our case now, we are moving these tables into warehousing. So I'll select on warehouse right now, and then I have this place. So the first time you'll be prompted to log in. You can click on edit connection, so which is going to ask you to log in with your organization account. But because I had done that before, so I don't need to. So you provide your organization email and then your password, then you can click on next. So once you click on next, you get the next interface where you can then select the data warehouse your table is going into. So it is validating our connection. So we have this interface now. So this interface is going to show us all the our workspaces within your fabric environment. So our workspace that we are working with is Nigeria Data Platform, which I can then do a drop down. So when you do a drop down of each of the workspaces, you can see all the data warehouse that we have within your workspace. The data warehouse, the one we created first, and then the second one also. So I am moving our data warehouse into the W1, so I can select that now, and then I will click on next. But this is a very boring process. There is no better way to do it yet. So maybe in the future with future updates, we will have to get a better way to do it, because we still have to do this same process for all the 5 tables we are bringing into our data warehouse. So from here, you can still specify the column you want to use. These are the columns from the data source, and then automatically the column has been picked and we can see the data type. You can also scroll down and see all the tables. So all you have to do is to uncheck the columns you want to bring and those that you want to bring. So in my case now, I can just remove this ETL ID, and then I can just click on save setting. So if I click on save setting now, then the destination has been specified. So I have to repeat the exact same thing for the 4 other tables that we are going to be using in our warehouse. So I'll click on add data again, then I'll specify warehouse. Then right from there, I can click on next once again. Then I'll wait and get the workspaces where I can then select the data warehouse I'm taking my data into, which is DW1. So I'll click on next once again. Then I have this interface. Now at this point, you can actually append if it's, or you can replace. Either you do a append or you replace. This is a new table, it's still the same. But in a case where you have a table before and then you are actually just updating your table, you can do append, or if it's existing data or new data, which what you have specified from the previous interface, then I can click on save settings. So once that is done, the destination has also been specified for the channel table. So I will repeat the same thing for date, product, and store table. So let me do for date first. Then I'll wait for that to on gray out. Then I can then specify the destination. So bear with me, there is no better method to do it as of today. So but if you know, please you can hit me up so that we all learn together. So I repeat the same thing, then I'll check my data warehouse, and then I'll click on next. Now it's possible that you specify a wrong data warehouse, but you can always go back and change the warehouse, which is your destination. Like say for example now, if I are taking my date table into DW instead of DW1, I can actually come here and click on this J icon, then it will take me back to where I can change my destination. So I'll click on next, and then I can change the destination and put it in the appropriate destination. But because I didn't make any mistake now, I just said I should mention that so that you won't have to come back to your data flow and then adjust things. So because I'm not changing, I will just click on cancel. So I've done that. I've specified destination for channel table and date and fact. So I'm doing that for product and store table right now. So for our product table also, now if you notice, when I have specified the destination for channel table, you will see that right here you can see that we have a warehouse. But for a product table that we are yet to specify the destination for, you see that it's showing us that there is no destination. So these are a check for you to know if you are specifying a destination or not for the table we are moving into your warehouse. So I will click on add data to destination now. If it's SQL data warehouse, whatever destination is, you can specify. So warehouse in our case now, then I will click on next once again, and then I will take it to where I can specify if it's a new or an existing table. Because a new table, I keep it on new, but if it's an existing table, you can switch to existing. And then on the same workspace, I do a drop down and wait to select the appropriate data warehouse we are working on. Then I click on next. Then I wait for that to happen again. Then I click on save settings. So now we have destination selected for 4 tables. So we have store, which is the last one. So on our store table also, I can wait for that to load up before I can now specify the destination. So once that is available for me, I can then select add data to destination, which is our warehouse, and I specify the appropriate data warehouse we are taking our data into. So Nigeria Data Platform, then I'll wait for the data warehouse to come up, then I select that and I click on next. Then I will save settings right now. So we have specified the destination for all the tables that we are bringing into our data warehouse. Note that if you do not specify the destination in your data flow, the machine will just assume or will not know where you are taking your data flow into. Now we have our destination specified for all the 5 tables. So unlike Power Query desktop that you do close up apply, in our case now you can click on publish. So once you click on publish now, then it will take you back to your workspace screen. To take you back to your workspace screen, so we can see that our data flow is being loaded up. Now, while we are working, when the data warehouse is created, there are some things that are created alongside it. So when you create a data warehouse now, you can see that we have DW. Now they are not the same asset; they are 2 different assets. So in Fabric environment, your first DW is the data set that was created when we create our data warehouse. What we created is a data warehouse. Now let me use this filter now to show us what is happening. So I will filter down to just data warehouses. Now we have 2 warehouses that we had created. I created the W warehouse and the W1, which are the 2 warehouses that I have created. But at the point of creating these 2 warehouses, there are some other assets that are created by default with every data warehouse that you are creating within a Fabric environment. So I will remove this filter now so that we can see the entire asset within this workspace. So when I created this W1, a staging warehouse was also created, and then the same thing for DW2. So, but one thing I should also mention at this point is that if you delete your data set, your data warehouse will be retained. But if you delete your data warehouse, both your data warehouse and your data set will be automatically deleted. So we are still going to play with this data set when we have more data in our data warehouse, where you can create reports or you want to even analyze it in your Excel. So now your data warehouse has been moved there. You can analyze it in your Excel, and then you have the connection to your Fabric environment, even in your Excel, or you can create a report from scratch, or you can create auto reports, and then you can have a lineage view and see the dependencies. So now we are trying to move data into our DW1, which is data warehouse we are focusing on right now. We can see our data flow is still running. So while that is still running, we are still going to just go back to our pipeline one, which is what we are using to actually move this data from on-prem data source into our data warehouse in Fabric environment. So this is our pipeline now. So inside of our pipeline now, you can specify other activity. You can specify other activity. You have your save icon, you have your save as, or whatever you want to save your pipeline as. And then on your activities tab, you have various activity. I mentioned earlier that we could specify a Outlook activity, or you can even specify a Teams activity, which is still on preview. So this is a Outlook activity. Then I can also specify a Teams activity. So that is loading up. Okay, so you have to grant permission and consent to your Outlook activity, so that we can configure notification for whoever you want to specify your notification to. So once you click on grant consent, it's going to prompt you to log in, so which I'm going to do right now. So after I've done that, then I can grant it access. So what I can do with this activity then means that I can say that for this data flow activity, once it is completed, or once it is failing, I'm not interested if it's successful. I just want to get a notification if it has failed, if this activity fails. So I'm just going to do a drag and drop from this data flow activity to this Office 365 activity, which is our Outlook activity. So we have a connection between data flow activity and Office 365 activity. So what that means is that I need to configure my Office 365 activity. So I can give it a name. So let's just leave it at the default name. Then I will have to come to my settings right here. Then I can specify the name of the person that I want to be notified. The person I want to notify when this data flow activity has failed. Then I can put the subject and then the name. So that is that for you, the Outlook activity. Then for data flow activity, but I don't want to do that now. I will just delete this activity. So I'll just right click and then delete this activity. So for data flow activity also, we can see that nothing is here. So I can select data flow activity. So once that is selected, we have the general tab and we have the settings tab. So remember when we created this data pipeline the first time, we had to click on new to create a data flow, because data flow is by default is not available in data warehouse, unlike lake houses. Now there's another storage inside of Fabric called data lake houses, which is entirely different from warehouses. That is more robust, but there is a use case for your data warehouse and your lake houses. So, but that's not the focus of our today's session. So let's just focus on data warehouse. So now we can now specify the data flow that you want to bring into this data flow activity. So now you can see that there is no result. We can then click on refresh, because we had created a data flow that is holding the data we want to move into our pipeline. So I can do a drop down again. Then our data flow that we created is right here. So I will select the data flow. Now, when you select the data flow, now you can then decide to run your pipeline. In this case now, the running pipeline is not important if we are just running just one pipeline. But in a case where you are running this data flow activity with Outlook activity or any other activity, maybe a copy activity or a delete activity, then you have to click on run. But already, because we had a data flow that has been loaded successfully into our data warehouse, our data set is actually already now in our data warehouse. But because you may want to combine it with other activity, and then other things you can do within your data pipeline activity is that you can do your validation before you run your data set. So I can come on view right now, and I can come back to my home tab. Then I can click on this validate. So if I click on validate, it's going to open up this pane for me, and then I can see that my data pipeline has been validated. So if I select this now, it is validated. But if I do not select any data flow, then this pipeline, this pane right here is going to tell me that, oh, I did not specify any data flow for my pipeline. So once I have that selected now, then I can just click on run. I can run my data flow activity within my pipeline. So then I can click on save and then it will run. So we can wait for that to run. The timing that is going to take for your pipeline to run depends on the size of the data set you are actually working with. So it is first saved and then the process for the running of the data flow will be initiated. So let's come back to our data warehouse that we had created. So in our data warehouse now, we expect to see the tables that we actually ingest into our warehouse using data flow that we could access from a data pipeline. So we can come to schema now, then we can check our DBO, and then we can see that we have table function, store procedure, and views. So we have tables now. So I can refresh my warehouse. I can click on refresh, then I expect to see the tables inside of my data warehouse. So let me go back to our workspace screen to be sure that our data flow, okay, our data flow is still running. That is why we are yet to see the tables inside of our warehouse. So let's give it time for the data flow to actually load successfully. Then we can get access to our data sets inside of our data warehouse. So while that is happening, I also want to show us how to actually query data sets from 2 or more warehouses. Now, for that to happen, typically, you can create a lakehouse. I mentioned that there is another asset inside Fabric called a lakehouse. So for your lakehouses now, it has a more robust compute engine compared to your warehouses where you have just SQL. So I'll go back to my workspace view. I'll just click on discard change. So I'll come back to my workspace view and then I will actually, so I'm on my workspace view now, then I'll click on new. So in my case now, if I click on new, what I'm still able to create will be limited because so I can create some new now. So once I click on new, then I can click on lakehouse. So I'll give our lakehouse a name, let's say lakehouse 2. So I'm trying to create this lakehouse now to show us how to do cross warehouse querying. Say you have data warehouse 1, you have data warehouse 2, and then you want to query your data sets from 2 separate warehouses. So that's what we are trying to do. And then also, this is going to show us how to create a shortcut within our lakehouses. So now I'll click on create after I've given it that LH as the name of our lakehouse. So here we have our lakehouse now. Now, unlike warehouses, you can ingest data into lakehouse in multiple ways. You can ingest it from a data flow straight, or you can use a data pipeline, or you can even ingest it with notebook. That is a Spark notebook, or you can use a shortcut. Now, what we want to explore here is a shortcut. I want to move a table. I want to have a shortcut for one of the tables in our warehouse for that to happen. So once our lakehouse is created now, we still need to wait for this refresh to be complete for our data flow that we had created. Okay, our refresh is still happening. So I think that's because of network. So once a lakehouse is created, let me just walk us through a lakehouse before our refresh is completed. So typically, this is the lakehouse that we created just now. So just like our data warehouse also, we have lakehouse that is being created, and then we have also the SQL endpoint. This SQL endpoint allows us to actually interact with our lakehouse or our warehouse with SQL queries, and then you have the data set that is being ingested. So inside of our lakehouse environment, one of the things that is striking for a lakehouse is that it can take both structured and unstructured data. Unlike our data warehouse, where the only type of data set that you can actually ingest into it is just structured data. So you can even upload files into your lakehouse. So I will go back and check now if we have our refresh complete. Okay, I think we are having network troubles now. So I'll go back into our data flow and then try and reload. Now, some of these things are is either network or it is happening because of it's a preview tenant I'm working with. So I'll open up back our data flow on Power Query Online, and then I'll just see if there is any problem. Actually, there is no problem. It's just that it's coming from a preview feature. So I'll just go through my tables one after the other to be sure that the tables are intact and nothing is wrong with our table. It was actually suspicious that it was taking too much time to load. So what I can do now is that I will just try and adjust the SQL query and change the fact table to maybe just the top 100 so that we don't have to wait till eternity before our data set will load. So I will change this to top 100. Then I'll do okay so that it will be faster. Now we don't expect this kind of performance challenges or bottleneck if you are working with a proper Fabric environment. It's still on trial, so some of these things are not unexpected. So I can then click on publish again. So before we wait for that to load up, inside of our lake houses, you can actually use your Spark notebook, which will lead us to data science experience of things. You can interact with your data within your lake houses inside of lake houses with your notebook. Now, unlike warehousing, now this is our data warehouse. Unlike warehousing, where the only thing that you can do is your T-SQL. You have your T-SQL within your warehouse, and then you have your notebook in your lake houses. So in our lake house now, you have a notebook that you can work with, but that is not available inside of your data warehouse. So in a real world scenario, let's say you want to do some data science model inside of your data that is sitting in your warehouse, and then there is no notebook that is available within warehouse. What you can do is to create a lake house that like we have created, and then you can make your data available inside of your lake house. Now, one of the problems that Fabric is trying to solve is that one copy of data for every compute engine. Now, instead of moving my data from my warehouse to my lake house because I want to do a data science workload, I don't have to do that. All I have to do is to create a shortcut that will serve like a link or a bridge between my data warehouse and my lakehouse. My data set will still be sitting inside of my data warehouse, but I can access it from a lakehouse interface that is more robust for several other workloads. So I'll still check now if our refresh is now done. So it's still loading. So inside of our lakehouse now, I can then load a shortcut. So if I want to load a shortcut now, I can click on this shortcut right from here, or I can come to get data. Unlike our warehouse where we have just data pipeline, in lake houses we have shortcut data flow. So either from here or from the screen the first time you are launching a lake house, you can create a shortcut. So if you click on shortcuts, you can copy data from external sources or from internal sources. Example of external sources that is available that you can create shortcut link for is your external Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 or your Amazon S3 bucket. So, but in our case now, what we want to copy is from one lake storage, which is universal storage for which every asset in your Fabric tenant is actually sitting on. So I will choose on one lake now, and then I can specify the warehouse where I want to create a shortcut from. So I'll go on. I hope our data set will be there already. So I'll select this data warehouse now where I want to create a shortcut from. So then I can click on next. So once I click on next, it's just going to give me this interface where I can select the table. Then I can do a drop down for the database also. Now our data fetch is complete. So the tables that I had moved from our data flow, that's from our Power Query Online, is now available inside of our data warehouse. So but I'm trying to create a shortcut which is going to serve as a bridge between our data warehouse and our lake house. So I'm not this data set now is not being duplicated between our warehouse and our lakehouse. It's just a link, just a connection string that is just giving us that accessibility to our data set. The original data set is just still one copy within our data warehouse. So I will just select the date table now, and I will click on create. So once I click on create, the shortcut will be created for me, and then I have my date table inside of my lakehouse. So I can click on refresh here. I can click on refresh so that I can see my table. You can see that the icon is different now, where you have this triangle showing us that it is actually a data lake format, and then you also have this other small icon to the extreme top left, where it's showing us that it's actually a shortcut. This icon right here, so it's actually a shortcut. So this date table now is not another table; it's still the same table that is just referencing the original data set in our data warehouse. So I'm navigating back to our data warehouse now, where I now expect to see all the tables that we imported. So we have all the tables in our warehouse: your date table, your channel table, your product table, your store table, and then your fact sales table. They are all available within your warehouse now. So the shortcut that I created inside of our lakehouse now is not actually a copy of this date table. It's still just one copy, but because of shortcut that is available, that is us combining the powers of data warehouse and lakehouse inside of Fabric environment. So we are beginning to see some advantages that come with using Microsoft Fabric for our enterprise project. So now these are all the tables now. You can actually query any of these tables. You can select a new query. You can even right from here, you can do select and do select top 100, or you can create or you can drop it. Now you can do select top 100, then that query will be generated for you. And then because our data set, of course, is not up to 100 for this dimension table, we have just 4 rows of data. So you can do that for any of our data sets. Another thing you can do right from here is that you can do a new visual query, which is a very cool feature. So I'm going to do a new visual query now. So it is just a low code where you can do drag and drop between your table. So for people that are not actually for people that don't like to write code, you can generate your SQL code even from this visual query, which is different from your SQL query. So I can do a drag and drop of our channel table. So I will drag it and drop it to this interface now. Then I will load the query for me in a form that is actually feasible. Then I can also drag another table now. I can drag, let's say, our fact table. I also drag it to this Canva. So this is preview malfunctions. So let me just close this, then I will do it for another table. So I will drag fact table again. Okay, so now we have it. So I have 2 tables that I've dragged to my visual query now. Just like you can do in your Power Query, you can still continue. Instead of going back and forth, you can do some little transformations here where you can actually manage your column. Do you want to choose a column you want to use, or you want to go to a particular column? So for our fact table now, I can choose column right here and then specify the columns that I want to use in my my workload. So I can select on choose column, and then I can just choose just few columns. Maybe I can take out this promotion key. I can take out currency key also. Then maybe I can take out all these updates and load date. Then I have that done. Then you can see that available right here. Then you can see the steps. Then it keeps getting bigger. Then also I can see the SQL query of the transformation that I had done. So if I select this table now, this is already selected, then I click on view SQL, then we can see the SQL that was generated for the transformation that I did, where I have selected less columns. So this is simultaneous corresponding SQL query for the transformation that I had done. So I can even edit the query and then see it. So that will open up a new SQL query for me, which I can play with and manipulate. So I can come back to my visual query again and do more transformation. So I can actually see the number of steps that have been applied. So if I click on this 3 steps now. I can see the steps that have been applied. Then this one now has 4 steps, which is choose column. Then let me just do a simple transform so that we can see the beauty of this visual query inside of Fabric data warehouse. So I will do transform right now, and then I want to, okay, let me do a merge operation. So I'll click on merge query. So I want to merge my dimension channel table and fact table. So I will select merge query, and then this will give me this interface where I can specify the key I want to merge my tables on. So right now, this is channel table. Then I can select my fact table, and then I can also select the key I want to merge it on, which is my channel key. Then it's going to estimate the match between the channel key. You see that, okay, the follow for the first and the second table. Then I can click on OK. So if I click on OK now, it's just going to show me a singular table. So from that table now, I can still view my SQL query. So the SQL query I'm expecting now should be a join kind of query for the steps that I've applied. So now you can see that the type of join that I did because of that merge operation is being specified, which is a left join. So I can view all the steps, and then I can select this now and view SQL. Okay. So there are other things that you can do. You can copy your step, or you can do, so this is the table that the fact table, this is the channel table. So from this channel table also you can download it as Excel file. Now it has been matched. So for me to view that SQL query, what I have to do is that I have to expand this table now. You see that we have this interface where I can have a view of my data set. So I can expand it right here by clicking at this arrow that is pointing in both directions, so that the table will be expanded. So the only thing I want to actually see in this expanded table is just the sales amount. Or yes, I can see the sales amount here. Then I can click on OK. So once I click on OK, I will see that the number of steps that has been applied is going to increase. So I expanded that fact table right here, and then on this table I can click on view SQL now. Then I should expect to see a join kind of query. Yes, that is correct now. So you can see that we can see the query that is being generated for that transformation that I had carried out. So I can edit that query so that we can have a proper view of that query. I can adjust it as my use case may require. Yes, also we can actually do data modeling. You can go back to our data view right from here, or you can come back to your view, your query view, or you can come to modeling. So just like you do on your Power BI desktop, you can do your modeling online. However, we should note that that query mode in Fabric is now new. We have a new query mode, a connectivity mode rather, which is a direct lake mode. But because I'm connected to on-prem data set now, it is on direct query. So I can do my data modeling where I can just do a drag and drop of the store key with my fact table. So in this place now, let me just minimize so that we can have more space and then we can see properly. So I'm bringing down my fact table now, and I will still reduce it a bit. So as apologies if you are finding it difficult, but I just need the space to complete my modeling. So I want to do modeling between channel table and my fact table. So I'm dragging my channel key into my channel key in my channel table. So that will create a relationship for us. Then you have this interface where you can now confirm if it is one to many, many to one. Now in our case now, because our data is well structured and is denormalized, I will expect to see a many to one or one to many relationship. Then I can click on confirm, and then I want to keep my filter direction to singular, not both. So I click on confirm, and then the relationship will be created. So I will repeat the same thing for our date table now. So I will drop date key. So I will drag date key from our fact table into our date table. So I also do the same thing for our product table. which is product key. I just scroll and see the product key here. So product key. Then lastly, I'll do that for store also. I'll scroll down and look for my store key where I can then use to model my data set. Then store key. Then I can click on confirm. So now we have our model created. Now is that you arrange it in a water flow, or you can arrange it in a star schema method. So where you can have this. This is a start. I'm trying to demonstrate star schema that Ayobami was mentioning in the course of his uh, session. So we can arrange this in a star schema just to put some professionalism into what we are doing, or some best practices. So our model is created. So you can create your measures, you can create a new report, and you can just pick it up from there. So now we are going to do cross filter, cross warehouse query between two warehouses. Now we have DW1, but there's a little icon here where you have a plus sign. So I want to make the data set in our lakehouse also available inside this data warehouse. So let's not forget that in our lakehouse now, I had created a shortcut for our date table. So, and then I'll have a data warehouse now. But for sake of time now, I'm going to use the first data warehouse that we created inside of our workspace. So in this warehouse now, we are going to be creating a shortcut within this warehouse. So now I have this data warehouse. Remember that we had ingested tables into this first warehouse. I clicked on the data set into this data warehouse using T-SQL or data pipeline. So I want to work on data warehouse that we created using T-SQL. So which is this one. So I'll click on our warehouse now. So from our no, this is not the warehouse I'm working with. Yes, I'm working on this warehouse. So let me just close all this navigation. I'm getting confused right now. So this is the warehouse I'm interested in. Okay, I think there is a mix up. Okay, let me reload now because I think there is a mix up from the network or something. So I want to actually show us how to do cross warehouse query. Okay, this is data warehouse one. Then I want to actually access data warehouse. That's DW warehouse. Yes, so now this is correct. So on DW warehouse, I have two tables. So I want to create a simple shortcut for this data warehouse now. So inside of this data warehouse now, I'm going to create a shortcut inside the lakehouse. So from our workspace now, I can go to a lakehouse. So inside this lakehouse, I'm going to create another shortcut. So I click on lakehouse, which is LH. So from this lakehouse now, I want to get data from this DW warehouse into it so that I can demonstrate how to cross query from two separate warehouses. Now the caveat to doing that is that the two warehouses that you are doing cross querying for, they must be within the same workspace. So I want to create a shortcut for one of the tables from our lake houses. So I'll click on Lakehouse. Now we are currently on the SQL endpoint, so I will navigate back to Lakehouses where I can then ingest data using a shortcut. So I will click on, I demonstrated that earlier, but for sake of clarity, I want to do it again so that we can actually solidify what we are learning. So I will click on shortcut now. So from that shortcut, I will click on one lake. So from the one lake now, I will go to my DW1 where I can then click on next. So from this next interface now, I can see all the tables that I have within my DW1. So I'll select DWO, or let me just do a drop down so that I can specify the tables that I want. So I'll select a fact table. From this fact table, I can click on create. So that will create a second shortcut for me within this lakehouse. So I have fact table shortcut and I have dim table shortcut. So from, let me close this DW1. So we are working, doing a cross warehouse query between our lakehouse and our data warehouse. So now I have the same fact table within my data warehouse here, which is dimension city table, and then a fact table 6 inside of my lake house. So what I want to do is that now, say you are working in the live and then you want to actually interact with your data sets with Spark Notebook, where you want to do your maybe some data transformation, or you even want to do data science workload. You can do it with your notebook, which is not available in your warehouse. But don't remember that it's the same data set that is sitting inside of our warehouse that we are using now. So I'll just click on open a new notebook now. So I'll click on new notebook. So that will open up a new notebook for me that will allow me interact with the data sets that is sitting inside of my warehouse with my notebook. But before you can use notebook to interact with your data warehouse project, you have to link it to your lake houses. So it's going to take a few minutes to load up. Now we have two shortcuts within this lake house that we can access from this notebook. You see, we have your PySpark, you have your Scala, you have your Spark SQL, and then your Spark R, depending on the language you are actually interested in. So if you are not a fan of code, you can just select this table now and click on this dot, and then you can load it to your Spark. Then that will automatically generate a Spark code for you. And then if I click on this cell now and then I run it, then the first session is going to take about a few seconds to be initiated before the cell will now run. So let's just wait for this cell to be run, and then we can then see our data set from our warehouse that we are accessing with a notebook via a lake house. So that is running now. So while that is running, I want to fetch a simple Spark code to change it to Pandas framework, because what we have right now in our notebook is Spark framework. So the Spark job is running. So once it's done running, we can see the table be displayed. So this table is now displayed. So now let's say you are working in your notebook, and then maybe you are not familiar with Spark, you are familiar with your pandas to do your pandas dot describe and all those things. Then I can create a new cell, and then I can paste this Spark code to change it from Spark data frame to pandas data frame. So if I run this cell now, then I can continue to interact with my data set using pandas. Okay, let me see the name of the cell that I'm using now. I'm using DF. So I can change this code now to DF. Then I can give this one data. So I'm just trying to define the parameter. Then I can say display data. So then I run this cell now. So now it has been transformed to a pandas framework. So you can continue whatever you are doing in pandas. Now the interesting thing is that you can also visualize even within your charts, within your notebook. So you can click on chat and then see a very nice visual. You can save it as image, JPEG, PNG, or SVG, anything that will suit your use case. So you can visualize and then you can over. So, but we don't need that. So I just wanted to show that you can actually move from your Spark framework to your Pandas framework, where you can start to do things like, let me see the name of the variable that I declared, which is data. So I can do data dot describe. Then I can run this cell and then see. So now you can continue whatever you want to do within your pandas framework, because now is in pandas. So now we have created our shortcuts. Let's now focus on cross warehouse querying. So I can go back to my lakehouse, and we know that our tables are now available inside our lakehouse. So to do that now, I have my data set inside of my lakehouse. So I'll go to the data warehouse where I want to do the actual cross warehouse querying. So this is the warehouse. Now to do that, you have to add the second warehouse you want to do the querying into your current warehouse. So that is where this plus icons comes in. So you click on this plus icon now, and then that will open up all the asset that is within your workspace. Remember that I said to do your cross warehouse querying, it must be within the same workspace. You can see that all the assets that we have are inside this workspace. So assets within your one lake, which is the storage for your Fabric environment, will not be showing outside of another workspace. So you have to maintain that same workspace. So we are currently on this DW warehouse, which is what we are on, and then it is grayed out because that's warehouse that we are working on. This is another warehouse that we created, but what we want to do our cross warehouse query form is on our lake house. So I will select our lake house now and do confirm. So once I do confirm now, I can then see, I can just close this, then I will see my lake house being added to this same data warehouse. So I have my data warehouse and I have my lake house. It can be another data warehouse. So let me add the other warehouse also. So you see that the two warehouse that lake house that we have in this cross warehouse query is already greater. So let me add this one also, just for the sake of demonstration. Then I can then click on confirm also. So within this one singular warehouse, I can reference any of them that I want to work with. But the cross query that we want to do is between DW warehouse and this lake house. So where I want to see inside of our lake house now, I can do the schema, then I can do the below where I can see my function table and views, then I can see dim date and then fact table for our lake house. And then for the original data warehouse that is holding this information, we have fact sales and dimension city. So I want to query this table in DW warehouse and this table in LH warehouse. So the sales table here and the dimension city table here. So what I can do now is that I will stay on this DW warehouse, then I can click on query. So once I click on that query, it will give me this SQL interface. Then I had prepared a query that we can use to achieve that. So this is it now. So this query now is very similar to your join query in SQL, but I will just run us through what we are trying to achieve here. So I want to do a cross querying between two warehouses. So I'm selecting city from the lake house, that's the dimension table in our DW, and then what we have in our lake house now, which is our fact sales table. So I'm selecting city from that dimension table, and then I'm selecting profit from our fact table. Then we have I'm doing a aggregation function and then a group by and a order by. So now when I said it's similar to your join query, you know, when you're writing a join query, you have to specify or you give your tables and aliases. But in this case now, if you look at line 4 of our code, you realize that I'm specifying the two warehouses where I am selecting data from. Now, because I had done this before, then I have to adjust this query now and change this one to DW, because the cross query I'm doing is between DW warehouse and LH, then and change this one to, then I can then run this query. Then I expect to see, then just like instead of having
Please
a
have 5 minutes left, please.
okay,
5 more
okay,
minutes, please. Yes,
all right, I'm almost done. This is the last thing really.
please.
So I can then do this. I had consulted this query before, so I had changed it to the warehouse that we are querying from. So this is one warehouse, which is DW, and LH, which is another lakehouse that is working as a data warehouse in this case now. So I'll just say select from warehouse 1, that is the dimension table, and then lakehouse, then fact sales table, then as fact table. Then where the key we are using to join it, city key, both from the dimension table and fact table, as against when you are writing a join query where you are doing join on key, on city key for fact and dimension table. So I will just do select and run this query now. Then I will get an outcome. So the outcome is coming from two separate warehouses, which is cross warehouse querying. So I can see the aggregation that I have done, because this city table column now is coming from DW warehouse, and then this profit column is coming from this LH warehouse. So the last thing I want to do today is to create a report from the data set that we are created. So to create a report, you can either come to any of the data set that you have in your warehouses. So for this DW1, I can come to the data set, like I said. You can just click on this. Either you want to create a report by yourself from scratch, you click on create reports, and then you can create your report based on the modeling that you had done, and then you have your Power BI online to create your report. Or you can actually go back and then do an auto report. So you click on auto create report, and then your report will be created based on the model that you have specified within your data warehouse. Though the report that is being auto created is still very raw and basic, but it's just a good starting point to complete creating a report instead of starting your report from scratch. But the disadvantage of it is that you may not have your measures, but if you had specified your measures yourself, then you can expect that you can use your measure to create the report. So this is just a auto-generated report that you can edit to suit your use case, and then you can save that, and then we are able to do a demonstration of ingestion to our data warehouse, do transformation, analyze it with Spark Notebook, create a report, and then we also did a cross warehouse querying between two or more warehouses. So I can just give it a name. I'll call it Naija.
Mr. Mr. Francis.
I just want to save my report. So thank you guys for listening. This is the end. I exhausted my outline. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Francis, for the wonderful session. We really do enjoy it, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for the ones. Have any question from the audience, please? Any question from the audience? We are waiting. All right, in absence of none, indeed, data warehouse is a very significant component of our Microsoft Fabric world. Next week, on the 8th of July, same time, 2 to 4, data science will be coming up again. And I hope you are really ready again to go into the warehouse, fetch your data, and run your analysis like our teacher have taught us today. So data science will be coming up next week, 8th of July, 2023. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate you for your time, making out time out of your time to join us today. And we hope to see you next week, same time. Please do have a wonderful day.